Brooks. And our next guest, Ahmad Brooks, former University of Texas captain, NFL veteran, ESPN color analyst tonight for the rivalry game. Ahmad, welcome to LaVell Edwards Stadium.
I'm just glad to be out of the Texas heat.
Welcome to
the mountains, the backdrop, the footsteps of the mountains. This is one of the most beautiful places. I'd heard a lot about it prior to coming here last year for the Hawaii game, and I appreciate you guys welcoming me on the show. And I'm kind of excited. I might form tackle Jerem here in a second. I'm kind of feeling like it. If I say something I don't like, I will form tackle.
That will happen.
I'm still mad about y'all putting it on my Longhorns too. So
just don't mention Taysom Hill, you know,
like you just did.
No doubt. I had nightmares about that. Nightmares.
There are Texas players that still tweet like, "Well, at least it's not Texas version of it." And he's doing okay with the Saints. He's doing some good stuff,
well,
right?
and, the thing is, he was a great athlete. So I think sometimes that was a very bad defense for Texas. But I think when you look at what he's been able to do, sticking in the NFL, he's a great athlete. We knew that. But those were, Manny Diaz actually got fired here, who's now the head coach of Miami. And Mac Brown had never done anything like that before. And so I as an alum and as a former player, I just remember thinking this is not good. And certainly, some heads fell after that game. So for sure.
Ahmad Brooks of ESPN, Texas captain at one point in his life, is with us on BYU Sports Nation. In your preparation for this game, what have you learned about the BYU-Utah rivalry?
It's a lot of hatred, and I think any rivalry game, right, there's that sense of emotion and passion, and it has to invoke something inside of you that makes you think about your rivals throughout the offseason. But then it's the bragging rights. I got to see them. So, Utah fans are walking around here with their chest out. And, very similar to our rivalry with the Aggies there at the University of Texas, you have an Aggie in your family. I don't care who you are. For most of y'all, whether you support the Cougars or not, you've got a Ute in your family.
And that's
stepdad.
Exactly.
Or look at the star quarterback for BYU, Zach Wilson, his entire family. So I think that's what makes the rivalry so intense. And then I also think that this area has great fans. In my time of being here and what I've been able to see, they're very loyal to their teams. And that also adds to the I think the hype of the game. And then I think you have two competitive teams this year, so that now elevates it to a whole nother step.
In your preparation for this game, what have you noticed from when you saw Zach Wilson's first start in person here to now?
It wasn't until I don't think anything really stood out on film, despite him being perfect in the ball game and everything that you saw kind of building up to that matchup. The reality of it is it didn't happen until I had an opportunity to talk to him yesterday, because you never really know what a guy is made of. You don't understand how he's going to affect his teammates, what type of culture and chemistry he will help implement. And I asked Kalani yesterday, I said, how much has this guy really impacted the culture? And it's amazing. And then he walks in and you see this good-looking, charming guy walk through the doors and so much confidence. He just oozes confidence. And I'm going to go on record. I heard you guys in your prior segment. I was back there. I think the edge here for the quarterback position goes to Zach Wilson.
Really?
And
okay.
I feel very strongly about that. I don't know what Huntley's going to do. He's coming off of an injury. I know what I saw Zach Wilson do last year to the Utes. This kid was incredible with his feet, had some clutch runs when things broke down, and broke the pocket from a very dominant defensive line multiple times. We know he can make the big throws. He's got the big arm. But yesterday when talking to this kid, finding out he's the hardest worker, he's pushing his teammates, those are the intangibles you don't really see on film, and we've all seen guys that are good football players but that are jerks in the locker room. He doesn't appear to be that way. And so I think Zach Wilson is a star in the making, and I think for people that don't know him, they will know him very soon. And maybe tonight he becomes a household name.
ESPN color analyst Ahmad Brooks with us on BYU Sports Nation. If it's not Zach Wilson, which player will have the biggest impact on tonight's game?
Well, you got to go to Zach Moss, opposite side, right? And once again, you're questioning his health. You're talking about a guy that's coming back, and I never had a major injury, but having covered, this type of football at this level for a while, when you have those kind of injuries, I don't care how much you practice, I don't care how much pressure they put on you, in game simulated situations. It's not like walking out here in front of your rival fans and playing a football game against guys that are trying to take your head off. So is he healthy? We've heard various reports coming out of camp that he's banged up, his hand, and all this other. Look, I just want to see him tonight be dominant. There's no question about it. When this kid is healthy, he's the real deal.
Yes.
And the breakdown, I looked, 53% of his yards come on first down. This kid out over 600 yards on first down. We're talking when first down comes, if you're the Cougars, you better expect him to get the ball. So I think today, if they can limit him on his carries there, particularly his yardage, this is the kind of guy that once he starts going downhill, he gets to rolling, and he's a really hard player to stop. But I definitely think for them, he's the catalyst.
What do you think of BYU's offense under a second-year offensive coordinator and second-year quarterback starter that hopes to be more explosive this year?
Well, I think I like Jeff. I like what he brings. And I thought one thing that he took advantage of in last year's matchup was the shifts, the formations, the motion. There were multiple times on film where I really saw the Utes. They were confused on defense. One particular pass, the play-action touchdown pass in the first half, they didn't know what they were doing, and you could see there was some confusion. I think they'll go back to that. I like the fact that now you have a quarterback and an offense coordinator returning. So now, in talking to Coach Grimes yesterday, he's going to give Zach more authority at the line of scrimmage and to be able to manage the game and to do some things when he sees fit. I think that helps because one thing that he said yesterday, he said, he says, I'm a smarter coordinator when I give quarterbacks options after the snap. And that's a big deal because sometimes coaches don't want to relinquish that power. They want to keep it all. They want to be calling plays from the sideline. That told me that he has full trust in Zach Wilson, but it also tells me that he's starting to understand you don't coach good players. You guide them. And I think more than anything, what's going to help Coach Grimes is going to be Zach Wilson.
You more than most understand preseason hype, having played at Texas and know what that's all. Oh my goodness, it's crazy every year.
Texas is back.
Yes.
Right. No, you're right. You're right.
This is kind of uncharted territory for Utah. Highest preseason ranking their program has ever had or enjoyed. They're picked to win the Pac-12. Lee Corso, your buddy at ESPN, says Utah's going to beat Clemson and play in the national championship.
Indeed,
we were all had our jaws on the floor.
We were like, yeah. Okay, go for it.
How much stock do you put into hype potentially being a detriment to Utah tonight and the build-up for this rivalry game?
They're the best team in the Pac-12. I think from my film study, from what I've seen, I think where you have to start is defensively where they're at. I think they have one of the top defensive lines in the country with 3 guys that will be playing on Sundays and Mondays. And then you move back into the secondary. I think they've got 3 established players, guys that can make a difference. That alone is going to help them. I personally think they'll win the Pac-12. Now, here's the thing. When you do have that type of hype as a player, it's hard sometimes to not believe it. And what they've got to be able to do is focus. And, one of the Cougar alums is over there, Kyle Whittingham. I think he does a wonderful job of keeping his players focused and on the next step. Not, what's going on here, but right here and now. And it's hard to come to practice every day and to see that, your fans are as hyped, you're hearing all these things. You have to stay humble. If they have strong leadership on this team, which is what we're being told, I think that's their greatest chance to be able to handle all this hype. But if not, I think at the end of the year, you're going to be looking at a team that was depleted because of all the emotions they had early on and just couldn't sustain it throughout the year.
Where do you think BYU has any advantages in this game?
Oh, well, number one, with the way that they dominated, a very different, in my opinion, Utah team a year ago, and this is how they did it. I think the turnovers early on, the punt, where they come back and they score, because Utah comes out. They're 3 and out. Mm-hmm. You get that punt, and you get it back, and you punch one in. And from there, they just started rolling. Zach Wilson's ability to beat them with his feet last year was the edge. That was where they really established the lead early on in the first half and through the third quarter. And I think when I start to look at this game, it doesn't really matter what this defensive line is going to do. There are design plays where they won't block a nine. We know in the zone read that's what you're doing. So it matters to me is who's going to make the key plays. Y'all know this rivalry much more than I do, but in rivalry games, it normally comes down in the fourth quarter. Who's going to be the finisher? This is why I think that Zach Wilson has been thinking about this game all offseason, because it's the first game of the year. You don't have to, I'm worried about my – no, you can worry about your rival right now. You could have started in January. And, in fact, he said he started watching film of this game in January, of the last year's game. And he said he's watched it thousands of times.
Yes, over 100 is crazy.
I love it. I love hearing that because those are hard. When you make those kind of plays, the pick six to your buddy Blackman and things like that, that's hard to do. This is why I think he'll be the difference. I think this kid was built for a stage like this, and when it comes down in the fourth quarter, I think they're going to have edge with his feet, and that's where he has to know. And I know they're trying to tell him to throw the ball. And look, if you're an athlete, be an athlete. The thing that stresses out the defense the most is when plays break down, you make things happen. Those aren't scripted, all right? So, and he does enough of that in his game.
ESPN color analyst Ahmad Brooks with us on BYU Sports Nation. How's your pronunciation guide for both of these teams?
You know, the great part about I have a wonderful partner in Anish Shroff. I think last year I only heard him mispronounce one name.
Anish is amazing.
He really is amazing.
That's
well,
awesome.
And BYU's SID department does a great job because they send you out. There's the audio, which is so helpful because, and we write everything on our boards in phonetics because if you write it any other way, it's not happening.
Forget about it.
Especially in the course of the game when you're just glancing down. So normally what happens is I let Anish pronounce it once, and then I go back, you know. And so, and then last year,
it's a veteran move.
Well, imagine the Hawaii game and BYU game last year. That was the most difficult game we've had, and I think he only got like one name wrong. So I take Anish's lead, and then from there, you know, you don't want to call numbers, but it's like, I hope he doesn't make a play before Anish calls his name. So, but it's very difficult. But I love the Polynesian, you know, influence on this game. And you know, and there's some great football players that come from Hawaii and just underrated in terms of. You could argue that Hawaii as a state is one of the top 5 producers of talent here recently. It's just based on what they do, but people don't give them enough recognition.
Per capita, I would say number 1.
Oh, no doubt.
Right?
I totally agree.
Yeah,
totally agree. Yes.
And technology is interesting because I think BYU and Utah, to a degree, took advantage of this in the 70s and 80s, right? There's big Polynesian culture in Utah. And now technology has afforded Tua Tagovailoa to go to Alabama. That would have never happened 20 or 30 years ago, right?
Yeah, and that's what's interesting. And then the thing is they play well. And I mean, and this is a culture that's known for epitomizing toughness. And you know, in football, you got to have some moxie. You got to be able to take a couple beatings and get back up. And that's what this culture is about. So I've been very impressed, and throughout the country, every time I see a Polynesian player or one with that influence, it's hard not to say, you know what they're made of, and most of the times, you know, that normally plays out.
And I would think the top 3 teams and Polynesian players on their roster, 2 of them are in this game tonight.
100%.
It's Hawaii and BYU and Utah, so it'll be a ton of fun.
Yep.
Let's focus on the defensive side of the ball because you, of all people, understand the dynamics of a defense, and you talked about that dominant defensive line for Utah with Penasini and Bradley and Lecky Fotu, and they're going to play in the NFL. It is what it is. BYU feels like they have a guy or two that are going to play in the NFL on the defensive front as well, starting with Kairos Tonga. What do you think of big number 95 for BYU?
Well, I mean, it'd take all 3 of us to move him, you know, and he'd have to be asleep for us to do that. I mean, you talk about just muscle in the middle of the field, and any defensive coordinator will tell you when you build your defense, you want to build it right down the middle. And what Tonga brings to this team is he's a pillar, you know, and it's hard to get any of those inside runs. But that's just not it. You know, his size is one thing that you have to deal with, but he's athletic, you know, and I think when you start to break that down, I think you may be seeing 3 of the best defensive tackles when it's all said and done. That if you're an NFL scout and you're watching these guys on film, I mean, I'd put him in a 3-4 system right now. I mean, he's great, and then I think the way that he's used on defense too really helps his status. So I like him a lot from what I've seen from him, and I think he's going to give this Utah offensive line everything they've asked for. They're inexperienced. They're replacing 3 key starters. I think today could be a big game for him.
20-plus NFL scouts in the house tonight, by the way.
Oh, man, that's awesome. I didn't know that. I'm going to have to use that.
Ahmad, you're one of the co-founders of the HALO Foundation. It stands for Helping Adolescents Athletes Lead Others, and we think that's a fantastic effort you have there. For those that aren't aware of what you do, give us a brief explanation.
Well, it was God sent, you know, and frankly for me, I've come from a family of givers. My mom's a teacher, an educator, social worker. My dad was always my coach growing up, so I didn't know any different. And so when I knew that I had a platform, what was important for me was to teach kids how to become accomplished dreamers. The 2 things that I know about is football and dreaming. I accomplished my first dream of playing in the NFL. My second was to work for ESPN. And that program is just based on leadership in sports. We feel like each kid can find their own leadership lane. Whether you're involved in athletics or not, that's beyond the point. And so what we try to do is teach kids how to find their talents, how to put themselves in a position to succeed on and off the field. And we're just very fortunate. My business partner is a guy that I've known for over 30 years. We've been friends since we were 4 years old. Sometimes I want to strangle him.
I know that.
Other times, you know, I just want to hug him. And, you know, we had a moment last week where we were starting I believe our 10th year in just looked at each other and said, man, we're very grateful for what we've been able to do. And it's been a lot of people that have helped us along the way maintain our success.
Hey, keep up the great work. It's great to have you on set with us here.
Hey, you guys don't show us up, okay? I mean, you already look better than Anisha and I, man. Just come on, man. Take it easy on us, all right?
That's not true.
All right?
We can't see your shoes.
Dude, you don't have a hair out of place, man. Are you kidding me, Jerome? Come on, man. Come on, man. Come on.
I'm trying to I might get a cut this week. I'm done.
Hey.
It's toast.
All right.
Hey, thank you guys once
Great
again.
to have
I'm
you on.
humbled, man.
Thanks
Thank you.
so
I appreciate it.
much.
Yes, sir.
Great to
Named
have
after
you.
Ahmad Rashad. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yes.
So cool.
He's going to form tackle Jerem during the break. So
Yeah,
we'll
I'm going to
move
go
that
this
portion.
way. Yeah, I'm going to backpedal. Yeah.